Welcome, everyone. My name is Lucas Hall from Landlordology and Cozy. I appreciate your attendance tonight. We're going to talk about one of our most popular topics, general landlording, Landlordology 101 or Landlording 101, and it's essential tips for success. So, what I'd like to do is give you a brief house cleaning instructions, and basically what it is look to your right, you'll see a GoToWebinar control panel, and in that control panel, it will help you control your experience a little bit. You'll see a number of different sections, one of which is called questions. So we will be taking Q&A at the end of the presentation, and I will get to those at the end, but if you want throughout the presentation, whenever you think of something, go ahead and pop it down into that little question box. And then I will see it. Hopefully I'll see it right then. And then if it's applicable to what we're talking about, I'll try to address it right then and there. But if it can wait, I'll just do it at the end. But go ahead and jot it down before you forget it, and you can keep a running tally. So you can keep adding additional questions throughout the webinar. Can I get a quick couple of responses from some of you that you can see and hear me pretty well, or if there's anything that I need to adjust, like sound or video? Go ahead and type something into the Q&A box and just let me know that you can hear me. Thank you, Melinda. I appreciate that. Thank you, James. Okay, great. Everything's good. Thaddeus, thank you. Rod, hey, good to have you. Thank you for attending. Rod is a good friend of ours. He does a lot of Q&A on Landlordology. Okay, and then the other part of the control panel is something called the handout section. And if you look at the bottom of the panel, there's something called handouts 4 of 5. And what you'll see in there are 4 different files which you can download at your convenience. One is a general pamphlet about Cozy. We'll talk about Cozy a little bit in this presentation, and Landlordology is provided by Cozy. It's a product of Cozy, and Cozy is a fantastic property management tool. So we'll talk about that. Then there's also a Landlordology tenant welcome letter, which is something that I use in my own life for my own tenants, and I usually give that to the tenants after we sign the lease, and it kind of helps them get started. You know, sometimes they don't know what to expect or what they should be doing, whether it's turning on utilities or how it's all going to work. So that usually helps me help them get set up. So feel free to take it and just customize it to your own heart's content and then use it for yourself. So that's why it's in a Word doc format. The next one is a move out cleaning procedures list. That's something I'll mention in this presentation, and I just decided to give you my own personal template so you can have it and change it and do whatever. And then last is the actual slide deck from tonight. So if something happens and you need to deck out early, but please don't, I hope you'll stay the whole time, but if you need to deck out early, you can download that and view it later. Or if something happens and I mess up the screening, sharing, and all that, and you can just download that and follow along if something happens. So that's it. Again, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in as we go along, and I will try to get to them right then and there if I can, and if not, we'll do them at the end. This presentation is scheduled to go for about an hour, and hopefully within that time, it'll be about 35, 40 minutes of actual presentation, and then 20 to 30 to 40 minutes, maybe even, of Q&A. So I like to stick around and do that. It's one of my favorite parts. So this is Landlordology or Landlording 101, essential tips for success, how to be an effective, successful, and profitable rental manager or landlord. The agenda tonight is, one, we're going to talk about general rental tips. So if you were to just get started and you didn't know what to do, what are some of the key things that you need to have an awareness of or an understanding of in order to be generally effective? Next, we're going to talk about the top 10 rental laws in nationwide, not particularly to your state, because we have people from all over the country tonight, but general rental laws that you need to be aware of, and I'll show you where you can find the actual rental laws for your state. And then a ton of resources, including those documents that I just mentioned, but other resources that will help you learn to be better, more ethical, more profitable, and how to successfully manage your properties. So without further ado, let me introduce myself. Some of you already know me. I'm Lucas Hall. But for those of you who don't, I am a project management professional, which is just a fancy way of saying I can get stuff done. I can take a project and see it through completion and do whatever I need to, whether it's schedule, cost, budget. And that is applicable somewhat to landlording because it helps me helps me actually figure out the processes needed to successfully implement a tenant turnover, how to get people moved in, moved out, how to find mortgages, and they track everything. It's been practical. But I am a landlord of about 10 years. I didn't always start out that way, but it was something I did in my side time. I have about 5 properties and currently 17 or maybe 18 tenants now. And I founded Landlordology. Landlordology.com is a top destination website for managers and landlords where they can just learn how to be better. So these webinars are part of that mission. And most importantly, probably, I'm the chief landlordologist at Cozy. Cozy is a company that makes the most amazing rental management software I've ever seen. It was something that I always loved following. That company was just amazing. And then a couple of years ago, they contacted me and said, listen, we love what you're doing on Landlordology. We'd love to acquire the website and hire you to do it full time. And I said, that sounds awesome. So let's do that. Let's go ahead and both try to increase awareness of quality property management and just change this rental industry for the better. I'm a family man and a puppy daddy, and most importantly, I am not an attorney. So when I say puppy daddy, I should say I have a 90-pound golden doodle who's like my firstborn. So I love dogs. But as I am not an attorney, I will be giving out lots of information, particularly about rental laws. I am not your legal advice. So I think all good managers and landlords should have a lawyer in their back pocket that they can call and talk to just when anything comes up. So please don't take this as legal advice. It is not, but I'm happy to help you learn about what's out there. This is Landlordology. This is the website that I started. You can go check it out, landlordology.com. If you're not aware of it, has a ton of great resources like state laws, services directory, free landlord guides on various topics, all of which I wrote, and then the general life cycle, which is a little bit of what we're talking about tonight. Cozy, which is the free property management software that I talked about. Some of you already use it. I know actually a bunch of you do. It is great. It honestly is free. You can transfer rent, you can screen tenants with credit reports and background checks, and it won't cost you a dime. So it was seeded by Google. They originally got their seed money from Google, and excuse me, and have some of the biggest investors in the industry making sure that we succeed. And so, basically, we want to change the industry for the better, and this is the way it's working. So we recently just had 100,000. We crossed the 100,000 customer mark. So there's a ton of people in this country using it, and it works great. I use it for my own properties. The four things currently right now that Cozy does is online rent collection, online rental applications, background checks, and credit reports. And the beauty of this is that these are the 4 main areas where you would need to focus in order to manage your properties well. And you can do all of that through Cozy. So in Cozy, it kind of tracks that whole life cycle. So you can take an online rental application, you can then go through and review that person with a credit report and a background check very easily for free. And then when you like them, or when you find somebody that works and matches your criteria, then you can actually start just collecting rent from them, with their permission, and they'll set up an account too. But it works flawlessly. I'm collecting all of my rent through Cozy, and since I started doing it, I actually haven't had a late payment in over 2 years. So, that speaks for itself. So let's move on. Rental tips. These are just the high-level tips and the most important tips that I would tell you if you and I were stuck in an elevator, or I shouldn't even say stuck in an elevator. I bet I wouldn't be that bad. Be stuck in an elevator, but rather if we were going up 10 floors, let's say, and we had a limited amount of time, what would I tell you, right? So we're going to talk about the different stages. So if you were just getting started, you had your first property and you had just done whatever renovations you needed and you wanted to put it on the market, where do you start, right? So let's talk about ads, listings, and showings. First and foremost, you need to get it out there. You've got this property that is, it's going to be available in a month or so, or 2 months. So go ahead and make a listing for it. Now there's tons of different sites out there that'll help you do that, or put your ad somewhere where it can be seen, but they're not all the same, and they don't all work equally well in certain parts of the country. So my tip is that Craigslist, at least in most major cities, is still number one. There's just a ton of traffic there. There's also a lot of trash on that site, but ton of traffic. So you can get a lot of inquiries from Craigslist. Postlets is a cool little company. It's postlets.com, and they will actually take your listing and you fill out this form, and then they will syndicate it to a variety of different sites, whether that's Zillow or Trulia. So between those two sites, you can really hit a lot of things that you need. Postlets, what I love about it is if you have to make a change to the ad, like say you lower the price, you can just make that change in one location and it will syndicate it to the other sites. Something that is actually being announced tomorrow is that Cozy actually syndicates to Realtor.com, and that's something that no one has ever done before. So Realtor.com it's traditionally only been actual for sale houses, but they came to us and said, listen, we love what you're doing. We want to back you. We want to make Cozy the premier way to collect online rental applications and listings. And so we said, sure, we'll work with you. And we've been doing that for months, or at least working with them. And tomorrow it's being announced. So that's brand new news, and you hear it first from us. So let me show you what that looks like real quick. In addition to Craigslist, in addition to Postlets, you can actually use Cozy to create that property profile, and then you actually get a little web page with it. I'll show you that in a minute too. You get a little web page, and that will also syndicate it to Realtor.com, which is great because then it hits up all just a tremendous amount of people. So let's go look at that. Okay, so here is a listing that you might get through Cozy. So if this was your property, 101 South Grand Avenue in Montana, you get a picture, or you get lots of pictures. You can put a lot of pictures, and I think it's up to 20 or something. But let's see, they can a tenant can, or an applicant, someone who might be interested in your property, can cycle through these, and they can do it on their phone. It's amazing. It's really not just for desktop; it's in any device. But then it tells a little bit about the property, as well as all the requirements for what the fees are, if there are any fees, and what the rent is going to go for, and move-in costs, basic general amenities, a map, of course. And then when they sign in, or when they create an account here, they can actually apply to your property. So the account is free. A lot of tenants already have Cozy accounts, and it just makes it really easy. So in addition to this, the same property gets shared on Realtor.com, and when someone goes through it and they look at everything that they need, they can actually click on apply, in a variety of different places, and then it will take them back to the application. So here's that same Cozy web page that it'll give you for free. So really fantastic. I actually list all my properties this way because it presents it very beautifully and makes it super easy to collect an online rental application. So if they wanted to apply, here's the form they fill out, and then it walks them through a full rental application where they also would then pay for a background check and a credit report, because that's paid by them and not you. So a lot of great information there. Let's go back to the slide. Okay, so those are the two best ways, or three best ways really, to market your listing. So you create this beautiful ad, lots of pictures. Those pictures have to be super, super clean, super professional. That's the only thing that's really going to distinguish your property from the neighbor down the street. So make sure that when applicants or tenants are looking at a listing, that they stop on yours. So I call that like pictures, ooh, pretty, because that's the thing that you want them to say. You want them to stop and say, oh my gosh, this is gorgeous, let me read more. It doesn't matter what your text says. If you don't have good pictures, it's not going to work well. So get a good camera, borrow a good camera. Even a lot of new iPhones have really great cameras, so make sure you have they have a great camera. And as long as you have good lighting, opening all the windows and lots of lights on, it'll be fine. There is a company that I like to use. It's called CirclePix, CirclePix.com. CirclePix is a national company that operates in most major cities, and they will actually come to your house and take a bunch of photos and then host them for you. Like for about $100 or $125. So really cheap, professional photos. They'll even do one of those 360 room photos where you can you can like cycle through and see the whole living room. It's pretty neat. I don't know if I could do that with my camera, but they can do that pretty well. So check those out. The last thing is once you actually get an applicant, you actually get people who are applying or calling you or emailing you and they want to know more, and you decide, let's start showing the property to these people. That's where I suggest you do something called a landlord's open house. Now, a landlord's open house is different from a traditional real estate open house. In a traditional real estate open house, you just put up a sign, you maybe put an ad out there and you say, show up, I'm going to be there from 1 to 4 on a Sunday, and to be honest, if you've ever been to an open house, they're usually not that busy. Maybe it's a really nice house, priced really well, and in a great neighborhood. The first day it'll be busy, but then if it hasn't sold in a while, there's, realtors hate doing them. So a landlord's open house is actually where you set up appointments, specific appointments, and you tell your tenants, your current tenants, you say, hey, listen, I'm going to show the house to as many people as I can between the hours of 1 and 4 on Saturday. Can you just take off? Like, just go get lunch, go get a movie, go catch a movie, do something, get out of the house on Saturday. Just let me have the house. You don't have to, but it'd be nice if you left. And what you do then is you market the property as early as you can, that the week before or starting on Monday at the very latest. And then as people start inquiring, say, hey, listen, I'd love to show it to you. Can you wait till Saturday? And then how about you come by at 1:30? And you set up these appointments a half an hour back to back, half an hour apart. And so what happens is you now have, 6, maybe 8 showings within that time frame. And they start crossing paths. They show up, other people are leaving. It's quite beautiful because it creates this buzz around your property. And I should say, in order for this really to work, you have to actually have decent pictures. You actually have to have a clean property. You actually have to market it well and put the ads out there, and you have to price it right. So those are some key things. So as long as you've got, you're expecting a reasonable amount of money for it, you're not overpricing or taking advantage of the situation where it's just it's a mess or something. Your current tenants are out catching a movie, you're showing the place every half an hour, and it works great. So you can take them around, tour the house with them. You never want to let them walk around the house by themselves because, you have tenants who live there and you're taking responsibility of the house for that period of time, and you don't want them stealing things. So you always take one group at a time and give them a tour. So that works well. I've actually been able to secure multiple security deposits or holding deposits at that open house. So it really does work. Give that a try if you can. Next, once you find somebody who actually does want the property and they say, this is fantastic, thank you for showing it to me, you ask them some general inquiry questions and make sure they understand the general rules, like what the price is, that it's no pets or no cats or whatever, no smoking, and everything seems legit and they claim to make enough money. Then you want to take that application from them if they haven't submitted it already. So use online applications. Never use paper applications. It's just, you don't have to anymore. You really don't have to. There's so many great tools like Cozy. It's free. And what it does is it consolidates all of your applications in one place. And not only will it keep those applications, but your tenant can fill it out on their phone. They can go back to their car or fill it out right there and just answer their questions, as well as even authorizing the credit report and background check. So incredibly easy to do. You don't need any special technology to do it. It just sign up for Cozy and you'll get access to that application. And it will be special and unique for you. So you have your own URL that you can share with them. So that's really easy. I actually put that URL in all of my ads, all my rental ads. And so when they're looking at it, they can just click on that link, and then it will take them to the ad and they can fill it out. Oftentimes, if I think I'm going to have a lot of interest, I'll actually tell my potential tenants that I'll say, hey, listen, you're coming by on Saturday, but if you want to fill out the ad beforehand, then go ahead and do that, or fill out the application beforehand and go ahead and do that. And then I will take a look and we can talk more later. So it'll give me a chance to review. Number 2 for applications, Social Security number is not required. I know that's a bold statement, and there are a lot of property managers who, would completely disagree with me, but we've done a lot of research on this. And in fact, we actually worked with Experian to be their flagship partner. So we've partnered with, we were seeded by Google, flagship partner with Experian, and now flagship partner with the National Association of Realtors. And what we did with Experian was we said, hey, listen, let's make this a secure method. I mean, right now, currently, people fill out an application on paper. They put down their social security number. The landlord then takes it and types it through some third-party screening service, or even faxes it, or has to mail it. I mean, it's kind of nuts. And then they don't even get a full credit report oftentimes. It's just a credit review or credit score or an approval process. So let's give landlords all of the data so they can make a real decision, and let's make it secure so they don't actually have the social security number to commit fraud or lose it. Our founder of Cozy, he actually was applying for a rental property in San Francisco a number of years ago, and he was applying to lots of properties. He couldn't find a place, and he had a landlord who actually ran his credit, I think 6 times, because he kept pushing the button, right? He was using a third-party service and kept clicking on the submit button because he had slow Wi-Fi or something. But what that did is it ran the credit score 6 times, and then therefore dropped his credit score tremendously. And so it made it even harder for him to find a place. So that kind of stuff just shouldn't happen, and that's why Cozy was invented. So give that a shot. A lot of times people will say, well, I need the social security number to sue them, and the reality is you don't. You can sue anyone without a social security number. I mean, most lawsuits, the people don't know each other's social security number. But if you did, the only time you would actually need it is if you won the judgment for a debt, and then you wanted that debt to be collected upon. So you wanted to hire a collection agency. And that is where you would need the actual social security number. But so what I do is I don't really care about the social security number during the screening process. I can get the credit report, I can get the background check, I can do all that without it. But when they actually go to sign the lease, I ask for their social security number. So I have it in case I need it for a judgment. But I honestly don't want to collect those social security numbers of all those people that I don't actually rent to. I don't want to hold on to it. I don't want the liability. It's just it's a risk that I don't want to take on. So number 3, collect applications from all adult applicants. This is actually an area where it makes a lot of sense, but you'd be surprised how many times it doesn't happen. For example, let's say you have a family that wants to rent from you. They're applying, and there's only one person working. And so let's say the dad actually stays at home with the 2 kids, and the mom's out there working. And they say, well, you know what? She's the only income. She has the only income, so she really only needs to apply, and the kids don't need to be on the application anyway because they're minors. What do you do? And that's a perfect example. Well, what happens when they get a divorce, or maybe they're not really married and they break up, and the wife takes off, and now you have the husband just living there, and you don't even know his middle name. You don't even know how old he is. All these situations. So I would just say, if anyone is over 18, make sure you collect an application from them. Make sure you run that credit report and background check. Make sure you know who you're renting to. Okay. Now, once you actually collect that application, let's talk about screening, right? That is the next step. So, I got some questions came in. Great. Okay, Rod is asking, what's the importance of national background checks, and does Cozy do national and for out-of-state felons? Yes. So in the Cozy background check, it actually does a national search and then dives in deeper to a state and county search. So yes, 100%. And then Kelly's asking, can there be a joint application, i.e. husband and wife? So a lot of times in the old paper formats of rental applications, someone would just fill in, John and Betty Smith, right? And it would be kind of a co-application. But if you think about it, it's not, right? I mean, it's just they put that on their first name line, and they still only put one social security number down. They still only had, potentially one income mentioned there. So no, joint applicants, you still need a separate application because they each have to have their credit pulled, and that's just the best practice. But what Cozy does is, if there's anybody that's applying together, like co-applicants, right, a husband and wife, or even like I have a house that has six roommates, and they all applied together. They're part of that whole evaluation, all 6 of them together. But each one of them filled out the application separately, and Cozy is smart enough to group it together. So it will help you evaluate that group, whether it's spouses or roommates, as a whole, as one entity, while still having their separate information. So it'll summarize all of their household income and then compare that to the rent amount and actually give you a percentage of what that takes up. It'll let you dive in a little deeper while still grouping them. So yes, good question. Thank you. Oh, more questions. Okay, Rod is following up saying, what if the wife is a felon or the husband is a felon or the young son is a felon? You know, you can only, generally speaking, you should only really take applications from adults. So if you take one application and run a background check and credit report on each adult, then you'll figure it out. Like the data will come back showing that they're felons wherever. But for minors, if you're not, you don't really need to take an application for minors. You should take, figure out what their names are and have those documented. But they're minors. You can't do anything to them anyway if they're minors. So even if the young son had a charge against him, chances are it wouldn't even show up in a background check because a lot of that data is protected at the county level because the person was a minor. It's not released publicly. So it's very hard to find, even if it was true. Okay, Shirley is asking, do you ask to see their driver's license or ask for a copy of it? Yes, 100%. It doesn't necessarily have to be their driver's license, but I ask for a government issued photo ID. So that could be passport, it could be a driver's license, it could be something government related or government issued. Now the beauty of a driver's license is you can look at the current address on there, and assuming it's not a PO box, you can tell where they're currently living, and then you can look at their application and find out whether or not that's their current address that they listed, or if they're listing a buddy or somebody that isn't really their landlord. So, okay, great. Matt is asking, if one of those 6 people does not pass the application, do you turn down the whole bunch, or is that just that one person? That's a great question. So there's 2 things that happen with screening tenants. You have to look at the income requirement, and then you have to look at the actual credit score and background check. And so for the income, oftentimes with a group of 6 people, 3 of them will meet that requirement. Like as a whole, they're just 3 of them. If there were only 3 of them, they would meet that requirement. But they have 6, so they've passed it a lot, by far. But if they don't all pass the standard for the credit report, let's say I like to say that 650 is typically my requirement for a credit score. Sometimes they'll even start at 700, and if I don't get any qualified applicants, I'll lower it to 650 and contact those people again and then continue. But if they don't all pass that, I usually have a standard, and I set this standard beforehand before I collect any applications, that if it's a group of 6, then 4 out of 6 of them have to pass that. You set that standard, so it doesn't matter who they are as long as 4 out of 6, and you make up your own laws, but make sure that those criteria that you set are consistent for each person. You can't change your criteria halfway through. And again, the felons, or criminal charges, generally speaking, I'm okay with any sort of convictions that are more than 2 years old, as long as they're not violent crimes. I don't need a tenant who beat somebody with a baseball bat. Or arson or something, something crazy like that. But if it was shoplifting and it was 4 years ago, then I don't care. So those are my criteria. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna keep going, and then we'll get back to those questions a little bit later. Thanks. Okay, so screening tenants. This is the essential list, right? And this is just kind of what you need to know. You're supposed to set your own criteria. This is just the general understanding. So first and foremost, are they able and willing to pay rent? So you're looking for income. You're looking for a source of money. It doesn't mean they have to have a job. It just means that they have to have the money to pay rent. Can they do that? Whether it's a savings account, whether it's a trust fund that they're getting payments from, whether it's a 401k that they're emptying out, can they pay? And then are they willing? When you talk to the last couple landlords, do they say, oh yeah, they were rich, but they just couldn't get their act together and couldn't pay me? They didn't have the willingness to actually make sure that rent was paid on time. So you got to have those 2 things. And then when I do talk to my last couple or the last couple landlords, which it's important, I think, to talk to the last two at a minimum. Oftentimes you can't find the third one or the fourth one. I mean, that's going too far back. But ask for the last two, because the one that they're currently living at, the place that they're living at now, that person or that company or that property manager is not going to know how they left the place, right? Because they're still living there. They're waiting to move out to your place, and so that landlord is not going to know if they trashed it when they left, or did they clean up well, did they destroy the carpet, because they're just not going to know. But the landlord before that will know. So ask questions about, did they pay rent on time? Did they pay all the utilities? Did you have any trouble? Did you have any nuisance complaints? But most importantly, the question I like to end the conversation with is, would you rent to them again? I think that sums it all up, right? Because if that landlord or property owner just says, yeah, they had a problem once or twice, but I would do it in a heartbeat because they were so great, they kept the place up, blah, blah, blah. But if they have to think about that answer and they're not quite sure, or they kind of beat around the bush, then, if they wouldn't even rent to them again, why would you? So that's a great question to ask. The seven protected classes at a national level are also something that you should memorize. So those protected classes, meaning what that means is basically you cannot discriminate against somebody in this category. And so some of them are really obvious, like race, color, religion, sex, disabilities, but other ones are not so obvious, like national origin or familial status. National origin is not necessarily citizenship, so that's different. But it's like discriminating against someone because they're Chinese or because they're Haitian or because they're not Haitian. Maybe that happens too. So familial status is typically referring to family size or children. So if you have a couple with 2 kids and you have a couple with no kids, you can't select the couple with no kids just because they don't have kids. That's completely wrong. That's a protected class. And likewise, pregnancy fits into that too. So if you had 2 couples, one was pregnant, one wasn't, and they were due soon, obviously, within 9 months, you can't base it on that either, because that's still familial status. So make sure you do not discriminate based on that. However, you can discriminate based upon occupancy. So each county has their own rules on occupancy, and they decide what a property or what a zoning will allow. So most places are single family or multifamily, and they're zoned for the most common occupancy rule I've seen is 2 people, not adults, but 2 people per bedroom. So if you have a 2-bedroom, then 2 plus 2 is 4. So you could have 4 people potentially living there. If 6 people in a group come to live in 2 bedrooms, you can just say, sorry, that's past the occupancy rules for the county. I don't have to accept you. It's just not going to work. There's too many people per house. So figure out what your occupancy rules are. It's not always 2 per bedroom, but a lot of times it is. And then number 4, I bring this up, sex offender is not a protected class. I get hate mail from this every time I say it, because there are a lot of people out there pushing for sex offender rights. And I know that sounds kind of funny, but sex offense is actually just a conviction, just like anything else. It's in a different category that is sensitive to the general public, but it's a conviction nonetheless. And they have to put themselves on certain registries. And you're allowed to discriminate based on convictions. In general, just convictions. They've been judged for some of their crimes, and some of their crimes some are worse than others. But you can actually go to this website. It's called nsopw.gov, which stands for the National Sex Offender Public Website.gov, and it's a national registry. So you can check there. Don't get too far into it because it's a little creepy, but you can dive in and do searches based on names, and sometimes they'll even have pictures. So I always search that too, just to be sure. But that'll actually come up. It should come up in the cozy background check as well. Okay, so next, deposits. So once you've screened somebody, you know what? Actually, let me go back a second. I want to talk about screening tenants. In addition to those 4 things, there are some. Let's see if I can find it. I'm going to pull up another slide real quick. Okay, let's see. Yeah. Okay. I want to show you, where are they? Bear with me, guys. I think it'll be worth it. Hold on. Okay, yes, here we go. I'm going to add a slide to this because I think it will be worth it. These are my standards. So this is what I use in terms of grading applicants. First and foremost, the income has to be 2 to 3 times the rent. So if the rent is $1,000, make sure that they make $2,000 or $3,000. So pick a number. Don't say 2 to 3, but pick 2 or 3, and then make sure that you judge all people, all applicants to that same number. Again, I don't allow any evictions. Period. And the reason I don't allow any evictions is because I think evictions, generally speaking, show a defiance against the landlord. It means that they had an argument, they refused to pay rent, or they violated the lease somehow, and then they went to court, and then the judge said, yes, Mr. Tenant, you're absolutely incorrect, you're wrong, you didn't do this properly, and I'm going to put the judgment on you. So it means that they lost in court. It means the public and the judge ruled against them. So if they have an eviction, it means they lost. So that's why I don't like evictions. But no convictions the last 2 years, and then no violent or armed crimes ever. And then I also look for low or no credit card debt, because I think credit cards are from the devil, but that's just me. So I look for that. Let me show you real quick what some of those credit reports and background checks look like while we're in tenant screening here. I think that will be helpful. Okay, we're back here. Let's see. Here's a sample credit report. So for those of you, you should be able to see this, okay? So this is a sample, again, sample report from Mr. James Hacker. It is not real, so this is what it would look like. So the cozy credit report you can get, which is free to you, shows you the big score on the applicant, the big Vantage score from Experian. And then it shows you the amount of credit used, which is 47% in this case. Then it goes into talking about the monthly payments. How much money is he spending every month, and what does that go to? So is it for a lease? Is it for a mortgage? Is it for an auto loan? And then next, which I think is the most important part, it's the total debt. This shows me that this person, James, has $202,000 in debt, which, that's not much if it's a mortgage, but if it's credit card, then that's a big deal. So it not only does it tell me how much he has in debt, which most credit reports don't tell you the individual line items, but it just tells you the sum. It'll tell you what that money is going to, or how much debt is on each of these things, and it summarizes it beautifully. So Cozy does do the prettiest and most elegant credit report I've ever seen, and I've ordered most all credit reports I can think of, on the market, because I've been doing it for a while. But then it goes into talking about how much, if the accounts have ever been late, how many of them have been late, and if there's anything in collections. Then it goes on to tell you all of the different trade lines they might have. So if he did have a mortgage, or he did have a credit card with this bank, BPT, then it would show you all of the different payments for the months, and if there were any that were overdue or delayed or late or whatever. And so you can see back here in March of 2014, James made a late payment, but has been clean ever since. So that wouldn't really concern me too much. And then it would show you any closed accounts, and then if there's any issues. So really simple, but very detailed, and it shows you trade lines for every type of debt he had. Next, let's move on to background checks. This is a sample of 2 different background checks, one for Buster Bluth and George Michael Bluth. I will ask, I'm curious if anybody out there knows who these people are. I'll give you bragging rights if you can name it, so go ahead and put it in the comments. But Buster Bluth, you look at Buster's credit report, background check, and it shows all clear. And what that means is that Cozy has, used our provider, which is called Checker. It's also a Google startup, or I shouldn't say Google startup. It receives some money from Google Ventures, and is the industry leading, in my opinion. It provides the best API for doing these checks. And what it'll search is it'll do a social security verification, eviction search, sex offender search, terrorist watch list, criminal and county criminal or national and county criminal searches. Great. Now, if you go over to George Michael, then you look at him, and we did the same report, but found that he had a county record of arson. Okay, so maybe I won't be renting to Mr. George Michael. Come on, nobody knows who that is? Okay, it's from Arrested Development. Okay, moving on. Let's go back to the presentation here. Thank you guys. Okay, deposits. Now that you have an applicant and you've screened them and they pass everything, the first thing I would do is collect a deposit, because you want them, you've decided, okay, great, I want you to rent my place, but now you don't want them to walk away or go find another place to rent. Then collect a deposit. So what I do sometimes is I'll collect a holding deposit, sometimes at the time of application. And if I reject them for any reason, then I'll just give back that deposit. No big deal, right? But if they get accepted, then I will take that deposit and make it into a security deposit and hold it for the remainder of the lease. I will tell them that if they back out, then they lose that holding deposit. If they change their mind after they apply, because that holding deposit is what helps them secure the place. It allows me the security to take it off the market for them, really. So that's another question that commonly comes up. So deposits, generally speaking, security deposits can be withheld, at the end of the lease for only two things: financial or material damages. So that means they didn't pay, rent, or they didn't pay the fees that were involved, or utilities. Those are all financial damages. Now, material damages are like they break your window or break your door down, or they start a fire in the chimney, or something that just goes haywire. And you can make those repairs. Anything that are really like excessive damages, something that's not normal wear and tear, then you can withhold part of the deposit to pay for that, and then you get back the rest. So I think it's important that you don't commingle your deposit funds. So if you do accept a deposit check, and you should, or just a deposit payment, make sure you put that somewhere where it's not going to touch any other money. I mean, certainly don't put it in your personal bank account. Go open a money market account or a savings account with check writing privileges, and make sure that you put that money there, and that's the only thing there. That's the only thing. So if you have 5 properties, make sure that you have 5 accounts. Go get the free ones, free accounts, and 5 accounts, and the only money that goes in there is the security deposit for that unit. Or I should say, if you have 5 units, it's one per unit. So then we'll talk about it later, but you then have an operating account where you collect the rent and pay contractors and all that stuff. So don't commingle. It is illegal in many parts of the country to commingle. And if you did commingle, you'd often lose the right to withhold any of the security deposits. So that's critical. I know that catches up landlords all the time. Okay, so now you've collected money, and now you want them to sign a lease. So what do you do, right? If you don't already have a lease, go to landlordology.com/directory, and you'll see a section there about leases. We don't make any money on those leases. Those are just the vetted, curated lease providers that we think are great. So I think they provide a solid service and a good product. And go check it out. Go find a state-specific lease that is rock solid, and then stick to it. Have a lawyer look at it. Stick to it. Don't deviate from it. If you in there it says there's a late fee, then stick to that. Charge a late fee. It's when you deviate from the contract when you start to get yourself in trouble. Again, as well as every adult person or every adult applicant filling out an application, you also have to have every adult occupant sign the lease. And specifically, make sure that your lease has a clause in there about joint and several liability. And what that means is that each one of them is responsible for the entire rent amount and all of the damages as well. So this is very common where you don't have joint several liability in your lease, and you've been accepting separate payments from all of the people, and then 5, let's say in the situation where I have 6 tenants, 5 of them just disappear, and there's only one of them, and they're like, I'm not paying the full amount because I've only been paying $800, not $5,000. so I'm just going to keep paying my $800. And if you don't have joint and several liability, it's harder to hold that one person responsible. Likewise, if they all disappear, then you could sue each one of them and try to get your full amount from each one of them until the debt is paid off. So it's really critical. And all of those sites that I mentioned will have a clause in there like that. When you do find somebody and you want to sign a lease with them, what I do is I suggest trying to go through the whole lease with them and make sure they understand it, so that you don't have to don't have to repeat yourself and then ask them to do something that they're not familiar with. So make sure that they review the lease with you. I take them to coffee. I treat them to that, and then I go through the lease for half an hour, let them ask questions. If you're doing it remotely, try 3 different tools. My favorite is called Hello Sign. That's an super easy electronic signing tool. I do it with all my remote signings. But there's 2 others called CudaSign and DocuSign. DocuSign is certainly the industry leader, but they're also the most expensive. So Hello Sign lets you do 3 lease signings or 3 signings a month, I think, for free. So I'd recommend checking that one out. Now, I hope I'm not moving too fast for everyone. So I'm seeing more questions come in. Thank you all for attending. This is fun. Okay, so now that they've signed a lease, everybody's happy, they're excited, you're excited. When you want them to move in, make sure that you specify in the lease move in and move out times. Now, that seems odd, right? Because it's a monthly lease or a yearly lease. Why would you care about what time they move in? Well, the hotels have figured it out a long time ago that there's certainly a check-in and check-out time. When you start a new lease, if you make let's say the checkout time of a existing lease 10 o'clock in the morning on the last day of the lease, that means they have to be out by 10, right? Now, I don't know many people who are going to try to do an entire move, early in the morning up until 10 o'clock. So they're probably going to move out a day or 2 or 3 early. But even if they did stay up till 10 o'clock in the morning and move out the last second, the new lease wouldn't start till 2 o'clock the next day. So if the lease ends on the 30th at 10 o'clock and the new lease starts on the 1st at 2 o'clock, that gives you 28 hours to do cleanings, to do repairs, to do everything you could possibly think of to get that place in shape. Now, if you're a landlord who stays on top of things, then you probably won't need to do a lot during that turnover. Yeah, maybe you'll need to shampoo carpets or do some painting, but you hire a painter, and a good painter with a crew can paint a whole house in a day, let alone 28 hours. So it's possible. I can replace a whole roof in less than that. So that's what I do so that I don't have any vacancy whatsoever. It's 0 vacancy. It's worked out really well for me, and I think as long as you have a good relationship with your tenants and you stay on top of their tenancy, they'll easily move out when they're supposed to, and you pick good people. It doesn't have to be hard. Don't give anybody a key before day one. That's so common. Tenants will sign the lease and it says, "Hey, listen, I'm moving out of my place on the 30th, and my lease doesn't start until the 1st. Can I just move in on the 30th?" And the answer is no way, unless you want to amend the lease to start on the 30th. And so make sure it's in the contract that they don't have keys until their lease starts. So if you do want to let them move in earlier, just change the lease, modify that, sign it, and make them pay for that extra day if you want to. But make sure it's in the lease. Make sure you have enough time to turn over the place too. Number 3, allow the tenant to document the condition of the property when they move in. So it's so critical that a tenant actually has a say in the inspection. If you go in there and you document the condition before they even before they move in, and you don't give them a chance to find stuff that's wrong, then why would they ever be held to that? I mean, why would a judge ever hold them to that if they never had a say in it, right? If they couldn't approve it, it doesn't make any sense. So give them the inspection sheet, let them fill it out. And because you just did a turnover, because you were in there during that 28 hours fixing stuff or checking in on it, you know what the condition is. So if they say there's a giant hole in the wall near the door, you know that they caused that because it wasn't there 4 hours ago. So they put that there with their big couch. It's not, they're not going to pull any fast ones on you, and it gives them a voice. It's a great way to welcome them and say, "Hey, we loved having you here. We love that you're here. Here's a chance to document stuff." Number 4, I used to give out all kinds of gift cards, Target gift cards, even pizza. And I honestly didn't get any thank yous until I started giving out bathroom essentials. you know, Giving out toilet paper. It sounds silly, but I like to put together a day one essential item basket or a gift basket that only cost me about $10. And that is a shower liner, one of those clear vinyl shower liners. You can get them at the dollar store, one roll of paper towels, one roll of toilet paper, and a small little bar of soap. It's just like a little travel bar of soap. You can get all of that for less than $10 and put it on the counter with a little note that says, happy move-in day. You're probably going to want to take a shower or use the restroom. So here's some basic essential items, and they will love you for it because all their stuff's in boxes. They sometimes forget that rental properties typically don't come with shower curtains or shower liners. And so you've given them the ability to freshen up, get comfortable, and it makes them realize that you're a landlord that actually cares. So it's one of the cheapest and most effective ways to welcome a tenant. Next, they're moving in, they've signed the lease. You need to collect rent from them. So certainly collect first month's rent on or before they move in. You don't want them to take possession of the property without having some sort of collateral for it for that payment. But I think the key to any good rent collection is to make it automatic and make it online, right? I know that collecting checks is still the number one way of collecting rent in America, but it is the number one way of tenant fraud in America too. So online security, online rent payments, completely the way to go. It's actually what Cozy specializes in. We have bank level security. We process rent payments, hundreds of millions of dollars for free for landlords and tenants. It doesn't cost anything at all to process rent for either party. So check out Cozy. It will change your world. And like I said, I haven't had a late payment in 2 years because of Cozy. So thank you. In the lease, make sure that you set up late fees. I like to charge a one-time and daily late fee. We'll talk about that a little bit later in the state laws of what's allowed. But one-time late fees when it's late, and then daily late fees for every day thereafter. Number 3, set up an operating bank account. This is a separate account. It's not your personal checking account. It is a separate business bank account. And if you don't have an LLC or a DBA, you can set up a personal checking account that acts as your operating account, I guess. But just make sure it's not touching any other money, right? Not the security deposits, not your personal stuff. That's where you operate out of. That's where you collect the rent. That's where you pay the tenant or pay the contractors for work. Number 4, I don't like to collect last month's rent. I think it's unnecessary. Now, I know it is a common practice, but if you think about it, last month's rent is solely to provide security, right? To make sure that they don't skip out on that last month. That's what it's called, last month's rent. But in a lot of states, like Massachusetts, for example, if you collect a last month's rent, you have to use it for, guess what? Last month's rent. And if you are in a situation where they double pay you, which happens a lot, they forget that they paid last month's rent, or they've got it set up to pay automatically, then guess what? You have to refund one of those payments because they're both for last month's rent. Now, what happens if you collect 1 month's worth of security deposit and then they do 2 months worth of damage? Let's say that they do $2,000 in physical damage and they skip out on rent, right? Or no, I should back up and say, let's just say rent is $2,000 and they do $4,000 in damage. Now you have a security deposit of $2,000 and you also have last month's rent of $2,000, but you can't use that last month's rent for security damages. It's last month's rent. So many states prohibit that. So it's just better if you need more security, if you think that you want more security, instead of collecting last month's rent, which is going to restrict you, just collect 2 months worth of security deposit. Just collect a bigger deposit. It's not hard. And actually most tenants would prefer that because the security deposit is considered refundable, right? It's something that they have to do damage if they're not going to get it back. So they actually don't mind it. And either way, they're paying the same amount of money. Once they're in there and they are living there for a little while and they're getting used to the place, there's certainly going to be issues, whether it's clogged toilets, broken sinks, whatever. Make sure that if they let you know about anything at all, whatever it is, by email or text or phone, make sure you just acknowledge that. If they leave a voicemail, call them back within a few hours. as quickly as you can. Just say, I hear you, I'm working on it. Just let them know you got the message. I like to say, call me anytime and be available via text message. Most of my tenants, and granted, most of them are under 30 years old, they prefer to communicate via text. It's just how they think. And I actually like that a little bit better than voice, because I can easily address it and just communicate back. But the biggest thing that most landlords think of, or most property managers, especially when they're running a lot of units, they say, well, I don't want tenants calling me at 2 in the morning about a clogged toilet. And to be honest, in 10 years, I've had I had one tenant call me at 11 o'clock. It wasn't even 2 in the morning, right? Because there was an emergency. The power went out. They couldn't find the breaker. I mean, they didn't have any heat. And to be honest, if there is an emergency, then you should have a way for them to contact you. Now, if you want to offload that to an operating service or a Google Voice number or something, you can do that. But you need to be available. So it doesn't happen. In 10 years, it's only happened once to me. So they won't call you at 2 in the morning with a toilet issue. They just won't. They don't want to deal with it, just like you don't want to deal with it. Okay, so number 3, give proper notice every time. Every state has their own requirements for this. Make sure that you give them notice that you're coming over. You can't just show up. If you do, you will get in trouble. And if you need to, use a lockbox for trusted contractors. Do not tell your tenants that you have a lockbox or what that lockbox is, because if they use the code to get in, they will give it to their friends, and then they'll forget to put the key back, and then you won't be able to get in with your contractors. Okay, so next, the lease is happening. It's almost over. They've loved living there, but it's time for them to move out. What I require is for them to give 60-day notice of non-renewal, specifically for fixed-term leases. So if they don't want to renew, it doesn't automatically renew, but if they don't want to, they have to tell me 60 days in advance. And if they don't, I hold them to 60 days worth of rent, from that point. I don't always raise the rent. I think that is a huge point of leverage for you. If you have a really great tenant and you say, I would love for you to stay another year or two. If you do, I won't raise the rent at all. Then that will motivate them to stay, because a good tenant is worth far more than what you could get in a rent increase. And then when they do move out, because they eventually will, you can always raise the rent then and make up for what you might have raised it earlier. So the typical rent increase is anywhere from 3 to 5% between, with the same tenant. But when a tenant leaves, you can raise it to whatever you want. If you're starting fresh, you can just change the price to, 10% more, 20% more, whatever you think the market will sustain. Start doing showings like that Landlord's open house anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks out. 4 to 6 weeks out from the end of the lease. And then lastly, tell your current tenants what they need to do to satisfy a successful move out. So what that means is provide instructions and a cleaning list for your tenants to go against. All right, tell them what you expect, because it's going to be impossible for them to try to guess what you're expecting. So make sure you're clear. So if you look at the handout section in the go to webinar control panel down at the bottom, you'll see that cleaning list and instructions list. You can right click on it, or each computer opens it a little bit differently, but you can save it to your computer and open it there. So that's my template. So these are the tips. So we just talked about rental tips, right? We went through ads, listings, applications, then screening them, and those are my standards. Then we moved on to security deposits, leases, then how to get them moved in successfully, collecting rent, handling repairs, and then getting them moved out again. So that was a long elevator ride, but those are my tips, my high-level tips for each of those phases. Next, I want to talk about the top 10 rental laws that you need to know about. And this is a generalized list. Each state is a little different, but we'll review that. I know it's going on 9 o'clock East Coast and 6 o'clock Pacific, but bear with me. We're almost done here, and then we'll move on to Q&A. So the top 10 rental laws. Number 1, these are the federal laws. There is no national standard, but there is something called the Uniform Residential Landlord Tenant Act, which ironically, even though it's uniform, it is there's optional adoption among states. So the state laws don't have to conform to this. They just, it's optional. The original Uniform Residential Landlord-Tenant Act was done in 1972, but they recently revised it this year in 2015. So deposit return, each state is different, but most of the times you have to return the deposit within 15 to 60 days. And that's a big window, but each state is very specific on that. And then most states require you to actually itemize a list and give that back to the tenant. So before you return anything, itemize everything that you're deducting, make it very clear, and even have lots of pictures if you want, and then tell them this is what I'm withholding. So you can't just send them a check with $400 taken out. You need to explain it. If you don't, you could often be taken to court, and you either have to give back that money, or sometimes if it was a wrongful withholding, like let's say you charged them for painting and you actually shouldn't because it was just a regular maintenance issue. You could be responsible for 1 to 3 times that amount, which, God, man, that would just be horrible if you withhold $400 and then all of a sudden you have to write them a check for $1,200. So that happens. So make sure that you are not withholding for normal wear and tear. In only a few states can you do non-refundable fees. Specifically, a lot of times people do non-refundable pet deposits. I think if it's got the word deposit in there, then that means refundable, right? It's a deposit. But you can charge monthly pet fees or monthly parking fees, which are just like, if you want to park here, you just have to pay this monthly fee, right? And if you don't want a pet anymore, you don't want to park here, then you won't have to pay the fee next month. But don't do any sort of non-refundable that really should be refundable. So commonly what they'll do is for deposit is a lot of people will see that it's $1,000 deposit, but 150 of it is a non-refundable portion to cover cleaning. And that's just not okay, right? You may end up spending $150 to do the cleaning that they should have done per the lease, but you handle that after the fact. So if that happens, then you withhold it from the deposit, but you can't just assume that they're not going to clean to the standard. So I don't like non-refundable fees, but they are allowed in certain states. Next, number 5, the rental grace period, right? Grace periods are very common. A lot of states don't actually have a statute on it. They don't require you to have a grace period, but some states do. Some states allow up to 15 days. Most commonly, I see about 3 to 5 days. In my state, I'm not required to do any sort of grace period. So I do a late fee, and that's number 6. I do a late fee by a percentage. So I do 5% on the day it's late. So if it's due on the 1st, then they get a 5% fee on the 2nd. And if they don't pay that, then on the 3rd, they get a daily late fee of $20. And the reason why I do a daily late fee on the 3rd and the 4th and the 5th and 6th is not really to make money, right? I pick tenants who aren't going to be late, and I make them do automatic rent payments so they aren't late. But if by chance it happened, that daily late fee is what keeps them honest about it. Like they pay that quickly, because if they get fined that one, that one-time fee, then there's no incentive for them to pay quickly, right? If they just have that one-time fee, then they're like, well, okay, I'm already getting a fee. I might as well wait until the end of the month and go buy myself a TV, and then I'll deal with it later. Well, what ends up happening is they never really deal with it, and then they pay you that month's rent on the 30th, and they don't pay the next month. So you get behind. That daily late fee is what keeps them kind of on track if they are going to pay late. So I would put that in the lease. Hopefully you'll never have to use it. And to be honest, if it ever happened, I would just waive it. I would just, if they paid me on the 3rd, I just wouldn't worry about it. But I would enforce the one-time fee. Usually the notice to enter is 24 hours. It does vary from state to state, but that is the most common amount. You have to give 24 hours notice. And again, discrimination. This is a federal. There are 7 federal protected classes: race, color, religion, sexual or sex, familial status, origin, and disability. But sometimes, especially in states like California, or Oregon, or Washington, D.C., there are upwards of, I think California has 13, 13 protected classes extra, and D.C. even has, I think, 22, 21, 22. So things like marital status, like you can't discriminate if somebody's single or married, sexual orientation, or age is actually a common one. or source of income. This is a big thing. So sometimes, specifically with Section 8 tenants, they're getting a portion of their rental income, right, their rent payment from the government. So in some states like California, you cannot discriminate on Section 8 tenants just because they're getting their money from the government. So make sure that you understand what your state protected classes are as well. Number 8, non-payment. So what this means is if somebody doesn't pay, then when it's officially late, you're allowed to send a notice that's called a, notice to remedy or notice to pay or quit. And each state has their own law about it. In fact, every state I've seen has a law on how many days you have to give them a chance to pay it before you can actually file eviction. So if they didn't pay, let's say in 10 days, if they didn't pay in 10 days or they didn't leave the property, that's when you can then terminate the lease and then go file the eviction papers with the court. So that's what that is. Again, similarly, like a lease violation, it's less severe than not paying. But if they, let's say they decided to go, adopt a pack of wolves, and you have a no pet policy. Well, if they didn't get rid of those wolves after your notice or leave, then you could file eviction. Most of the time, lease violations are given a little more time to fix the problem, like 30 days, because it's not as a big a deal as not paying rent. And then lastly, the 10th one that you should be aware of is that some states will actually allow an unconditional unconditional quit notice, which means that in some of these states, if they violate the lease, you don't have to give them a chance to fix it. You can just terminate the lease. So if my tenant adopted a pack of wolves and I lived in one of these states, I could just say, the lease is terminated. It doesn't matter if you get rid of the dogs. I'm not going to rent to you anymore. And then you can file for eviction if they don't leave. So that's what that is. Okay. Lastly, before we get onto the resources, I want to show you some of the best practices. Now, these are sometimes laws, sometimes not, but I think every property manager and landlord should follow them. Number 1, heating. Make sure that every part of the house can get up to about 68 degrees. It's just not really a good environment if it's not. So make sure that you can keep the place warm, because if it's not warm enough, you could get dinged with an inhabitability issue. Number 2, make sure that each bedroom has 2 exits, whether that's a window or a window big enough for somebody to crawl out of, and each county has certain requirements on the size, or a door, so 2 doors or something. So make sure they can get out in case of a fire. Number 3, make sure you put smoke detectors in each bedroom. So important. Put smoke detectors in each bedroom, and then a carbon monoxide detector near the bedrooms, and oftentimes within 15 feet. If you don't have those and they decide to hold something against you, they could get you on that, and that could be just a small legality that they could win a court case over. Number 4, make sure that you realize that the actions of your tenants can come and haunt you and affect you. For example, if your tenants are throwing loud parties and the neighbors complain, it could actually be a nuisance complaint. And when the police track that and keep a record of it, they eventually could fine you as the landlord for making sure that your tenants aren't keeping the order. So if they don't mow the grass and you start to get rats in the weeds, and they're just not taking out their trash, or they're piling up the trash on the front lawn, that kind of stuff can actually result in a fine against you. So make sure that you understand that and you're checking in with your tenants. And lastly, I like to check in once a month. And what that means is I simply send them an email and say, hey, listen, how you guys doing? Is there anything that needs my attention? And I'll leave it at that. I usually like to try to visit once every quarter or once every 6 months just to stay on top of it. And I give proper notice. So those are my best practices. Those are the top 10 rental laws as well. Make sure that you understand what it is for your state laws, and which I will address really quickly here. Now, I want to give out links and resources that might actually help you take this into the real world. Number 1 is Landlordology. It's where you probably came from to get to this webinar. So go check that out. There's a ton of stuff there, including the very first link, which is the state law regulations in that left-hand side. Or check that out. What you'll see It's landlordology.com/state-laws, and what you'll see is this giant map here. And we actually have more green states than what's shown here. But anyway, you can click on that and get a full list of all the state laws for your state. And we have it summarized with the links to the statutes, so you can trust that we didn't just make it up. If you want more information on how to be a profitable landlord, check out these free guides. One is rent collection, the other one is tenant screening, marketing, and then move in, move out. They're completely free. You can even get the green one on Amazon as a printed copy, so you can just order that. We don't make any money on them. We just, for Amazon, we just charge you the cost to make it, and that's yours. We hope that it'll help you be more profitable. The rent collection one is awesome. It's really in depth, and it will teach you how to make sure that your tenants pay on time every single month. And the tenant screening one is my next favorite. So I would say if you had to pick two, download both of those. Again, go check out Cozy. Landlordology is provided by Cozy. It is the marketing division of Cozy, and it offers the absolute best tools for property managers and landlords to collect rent, screen their tenants, and track everything. I can manage my properties from anywhere in the world. I did it last year from Vail for a month. I did it last year from Thailand for a month, and I was able to manage all of these properties through this software from anywhere. It was just, I couldn't imagine doing that 5 years ago, but Cozy is amazing, and it's taken the world by storm. If you do have additional questions, we have a podcast. It's a Q&A podcast called Ask Lucas. It's asklucas.com. And if you ask a question that is applicable to a larger audience and would be a good lesson learned, I will answer it in the podcast. And they're only about 5 or 6 minutes, and it's fun. So we have a little archive there. You can check it out and just listen to what we have, and hopefully it'll answer some questions. So now let's move on to the question and answer portion. And this is my absolute favorite part of the night. We already have a ton of questions that have come in, so thank you very much. Let me make this bigger so I can read. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer some of these. Thank you all for your questions. Wow, okay. If Stephen is asking, do you automatically disqualify illegal immigrants, or will Cozy find info on them as well? I live in a rural area with lots of farm workers. Some are illegal but have good jobs, and most do not want any drama. You know what? You're absolutely right. There are a lot of people out there who are not U.S. citizens who are perfectly good tenants. So go back to the screening and think, what I was saying, are they able and willing to pay rent? So if you, there's certainly parts of the country where you're not going to have any tenants if you require citizenship. You just won't find anybody. So you have to weigh that for yourself. Will Cozy disqualify illegal immigrants? Cozy doesn't disqualify anyone. What it does is it gives you the information to do that judgment for yourself. So we're not going to assume you want to disqualify or qualify somebody. We just give you the valuable information you need. But no. So the thing that you can't do with someone who doesn't have a social security number is you can't get a credit report, right? You can do a background check. And if they have a judgment in any state, it'll find it. But you can't pull a credit report on somebody who doesn't have a social security number. So you could waive that part. If you are allowed to discriminate based on citizenship, which you can in some states, then you can do that. If you're in a state like California where you can't discriminate based on citizenship, you can set the requirement that that you need a credit report, that you just need a credit report as part of the qualification. So you could do it that way. But it's up to you. You have to set your own business requirements and decide what's the risk and is it worth the profit, and decide what you're going to do with illegal immigrants. Just know that if they aren't citizens, it is going to be very hard for you to sue them or even collect on any wages if you need to. So there's that additional risk that illegal immigrants bring. Okay, I hope that answered your question, Stephen. Kevin is asking, once set up with Cozy, are rental payments made through Cozy automatically processed each month, or would we need to prompt the tenant to pay each month? I'm glad you asked that question. So Cozy has always provided online recurring payments. We actually started out as making that a requirement, but now we've also given the tenant the ability to pay one-time payments or not set up recurring at all. I would specify in your lease that payments have to be recurring and automatic, and if you're going to use Cozy, then say put that in your lease. Most states allow you to mandate a certain payment method. Some states, like California, only force you to say if you're going to mandate online payments, you also have to allow a different form too, if they want to, but you can offer online payments. But if your state allows it, just go ahead and mandate it in the lease. And yes, so I would suggest that if they don't set up those recurring payments, then it becomes a lease violation because they haven't set up those recurring payments. But if you want to let them do one-time payments, that's fine. There are plenty of people who aren't on one-time payments in Cozy, and they literally, the tenants log in and make those payments. Every month. That's just part of their schedule. So they pick the day that they want to pay. And they do get email notifications. So most of our landlords don't have to follow up with our tenants at all. It's just all automatic, or they get the notifications for it. So it saves you a lot of time not having to follow up with people. Okay, so Pamela is asking, how do you check employment? A lot of companies charge for that now. Yes. So the way I check for employment, because I used to try to call the employer and say, does this person work for you? And unless it was a small company, they wouldn't divulge any information at all. They wouldn't tell me anything. It's a security issue or privacy issue. But what I do is tell my tenants that they have to produce a pay stub. So that pay stub will not only verify their employment, but it will tell me how long they've lived there, if there's any sort of withholdings like child support that come out automatically, or other judgments or garnishments, which I have to weigh into the whole evaluation of their income. So I make them produce a pay stub. Oftentimes they can just download it off the internet and send it to me in an email, or even just take a picture with their phone, which is not hard. So yes, I require pay stubs. That's how I verify employment. Kevin is asking, okay, so the last two landlords are important to ask when you're trying to screen a tenant, because the last landlord may share a good reference just to get them out of the property, which is completely true, right? If they have a horrible tenant, it's a nightmare. They'll say anything to get that tenant to leave. And if that tenant doesn't find a place to leave, then they're going to be stuck with the tenant for a month longer. But the second landlord may be apt to share more information. Yes, thank you, Kevin. That's exactly right. That's why you check two landlords, the two previous landlords, because the second one from two landlords ago will actually give you the real story. Rod is asking, Florida has state shoppers. Florida considers two people is permissible in one bedroom. Okay, thanks for sharing. Yeah, so it sounds like Florida is in line with the majority of counties or states, and then subsequent counties, about 2 people per bedroom as the occupancy rule. Stephen has a comment about sex offenders. Sounds like he agrees that you can discriminate based on a conviction for a sex offense. Good man. Okay, so Brandon is saying, hi Lucas, can a landlord reject tenants who only have income from government sources, such as Section 8? Brandon, you know what? In some states you can, in some states you can't. So like in California, you can't discriminate based on source of income. But in other states, like in Virginia, where I have properties too, you don't have to participate in the Section 8 program. And actually, Section 8 is a county thing. So you can call the counties, ask them if you have to participate in the Section 8 program. If they say yes, it's mandatory, then you can't discriminate based on that. But if you don't, then you can just say, listen, I don't participate in Section 8, so sorry. So that is not a protected class. And Section 8 is not a mandatory program, generally speaking. But if source of income is a protected class, then it shouldn't matter where the money is coming from, as long as it's up to your criteria, like 2 to 3 times worth the rent. Good question, Brandon. Thank you for asking that. Elsa is asking, does the credit report belong to the applicant? And if so, can the report be sent to them or be used at other rental opportunities? Good question. Yeah, that's really good. So if a landlord fills out, if a tenant fills out an application through Cozy and gets a credit report and a background check as well, the tenant gets a copy of all of that. And that's the beauty of it. So they pay for it instantly. The credit report and background check are shared with the landlord and the tenant at the same time. So there's no monkey business, right? They get the same information that you do as a landlord. And the beauty of that is not only is it quick and easy, but if you have to reject them based on something in the credit report, federal guidelines say that you need to provide them either with a copy of that report or show them how to get it. But with Cozy, they already have it. So there's no extra work involved. It's just simply call them up, tell them they didn't get the place, and you're done, right? And they can look at their own credit report. They can decide how to fix a problem if maybe there's an error on it, and take it from there. But you don't have to be involved. So Cozy is actually working very right now, as I'm speaking, working on making that credit report and background check and application something the tenant can take with them. So the tenant, the idea is that it'll be the last application they ever fill out. So if they didn't get a place and they ordered and paid for this, they can just share it with another landlord via email, like fill in an email address, and then that landlord gets access to all that same information. It's actually quite a great idea, and we're working on it. In the meantime, they could simply just print out those reports and give that to the landlord if the landlord would take it. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, so Stephen is saying, that's so awesome. I'm going to use Cozy from now on. Good, man. I'm glad. I want you to know, everyone who's listening, if you do sign up for Cozy tonight or tomorrow, anytime in the next couple of days, send me an email. I would love to hear what you have to say and your experiences. We have an amazing support team. Send me an email. My email is lucas@cozy.co or lucas@landlordology.com. You should have gotten something from GoToWebinar with my email address in it, so you can reply to that. Okay, we have more questions. This is great. Rod is asking, what about partial months rent and the security? So I think you're probably asking about security deposits and partial months rent payments. So yes, if you are taking prorated rent, you can collect the deposit and prorated rent through Cozy, which it's actually really easy. I mean, there is a little bit of a processing time of a couple days, but if you accept an application or you find a tenant that you like and you want to rent to, just walk through a couple steps in Cozy, and then you can tell us how much money you're going to collect in a prorated rent, and then how much you want from a deposit. And they'll get notifications. They'll get all the email instructions they need to set up their account and authorize those payments. So they'll add their bank account information, or they'll pay with a debit card or credit card, and then that money gets transferred to you. So that can happen long before your lease even starts, which is great because oftentimes, the lease isn't going to start for 30 or 45 days, but you need that prorated rent now, or you need that deposit now. So yes, you can do that through Cozy. It's awesome. Okay, so Kelly is asking, what is the standard amount based on the monthly rental for a deposit? Generally speaking, it's 1 month's rent. So that is the most common number I've ever seen, is you collect a deposit that is equal to 1 month's rent. But most states have a maximum that you can charge. And the most common maximum I've seen is 2 months rent. Some states don't have a limit, and some states allow up to 3 or 4 times the rent. But I only charge 1 month's worth of rent because, to be honest, it's hard for a tenant to come up with 2 or 3 or 4 times the rent. They're moving, right? They still have to pay rent somewhere else. And if you do that, you might not get that many applicants. So I charge 1 month's worth of rent as the deposit. Now, if I raise that rent over time, I do make sure that the deposit matches the rent amount at all times. So the day that the rent goes up is also the day that they have to put in more money to the deposit to make it equal. And that's just so if they abandon the lease or I need, a month's worth of rent, I have it. Okay, so Kelly is asking, what is the standard amount base? Oh no, you already did it. I'm sorry, Kelly. Good. I'm glad I answered it. Okay, Sunny is asking, sorry, what was the website you recommended to get state-specific leases? Yes, good question. Go to landlordology.com and check out the directory, the services directory, and you'll see a link there for leases and legal forms. And there's about 6 or 5 different sites that I just think are awesome. I've bought leases from them. I think they're great. Check them out. Each one is a little different, so decide which one works for you, but make sure it's state specific. Okay, so I hope that helps, Sunny. Pamela is asking, what are the 4 items in the welcome package? Again, yes. So the bathroom essentials on move-in day, the things I put into my bathroom essentials kit that I leave on a countertop for them when they're moving in is a roll of paper towels, a toilet paper roll, and you can buy like those Scott paper towel or Scott toilet paper rolls from Costco or something, and they're individually wrapped, which is nice. a roll of paper towels, a roll of toilet paper, a clear vinyl shower liner, which you can get for $1 or $2, and then a little bar of travel soap. You can get that at Target for $1. Those 4 things put together will make their life so much easier, and you don't have to spend $20 or $30 on a pizza or a Target gift card. You can spend it for like $9 or $10 and be done with it, and they will love you. I promise you. That's when I started getting thank yous. Okay, Tom is asking, what is the proper daily rent charge in California? I don't remember off the top of my head, but you can go to landlordology.com/state-laws and click on California, and that will tell you. Andrea is asking, can you show your requirements again? Yes, I can. I sure can. Let's go back to that page. I hope you're still with us, Andrea. Let's go there. Okay. Okay, here are my standards. So my standards for screening are income being 2 to 3 times the rent, no evictions ever, no convictions in the last 2 years, but anything past 2 years, like for basic conviction, that's fine for me at least. And then no violent or armed crimes ever. If they beat somebody, I'm just not going to deal with it. That's not who I want to rent to. That's not who I want to have to knock on their door to enter, and they don't want me to enter. I don't want to deal with it. And then I don't like credit card debt. So, and then I don't have this listed, but my credit score, I typically, if it's a good property, when I'm leasing something, I'll make it 700, but that's kind of high for a lot of areas. So, maybe 650 is better. 600 is getting a little wishy-washy. I don't like credit scores of 600 because it usually means they have judgments or collections or a lot of store credit cards. That sometimes is, an issue. Like, I don't really want somebody who spends $20,000 on a Victoria's Secret credit card because, it means they're not really wise with their money, I suppose. I mean, I'm not here to judge people, but store credit cards have the highest interest rate out of any credit card, whether it's Gap or J. Crew or whatever. And it just means that they're not smart about credit cards. So anyway, nothing against Victoria's Secret. Okay, so Katrina is asking, what if an eviction was filed in error and has not been removed and the applicant has proof? Do you still rent to them? Yes. If the eviction was wrongful, and it was incorrect and filed in error, and they have proof of that resolution, which is usually some sort of court document, then absolutely, because there are errors sometimes in the data, and if they have proof of it, then yes, it didn't happen, right? That's okay. Do you pay yourself as a landlord out of the operating account in addition to a savings account to place the deposits in? So yes, if you are going to pay yourself, which is a common practice because there is a management cost. So a lot of people count that into their calculations, which I think is a smart idea, but you don't have to. If it's your property, you're collecting all the rent, then you don't really need to pay yourself. But I think it's a smart idea to be business savvy like that. So you pay yourself a fee, even though it's all your money anyway. And yes, you would pay it out of the operating account. And then you would move that fee from your operating account to your personal account, and that would be your payment. And make sure that everything's documented well with that transaction. If you have it all in the same bank, then it's pretty easy to transfer the money. Will the background check in Cozy confirm that the tenant has actually been employed and earning taxable income to see if they meet the 2 to 3 times the rent? No, because to be honest, there's not an automated system on the planet that will go pull the records from a corporation and see if they've been employed for when they said they've been employed. So that's why you would take a pay stub. That's why you would make them prove it to you with a pay stub so you can see what they've actually been earning and how long they've worked there. So you need to verify that. Or if it's a small employer, you might be able to get them to talk to you about it. But Cozy does ask them what their income is. So they may put down that their income is $100,000, and if there's 3 or 4 roommates, that adds it all up and it helps you figure out that calculation. But it's important to make sure that they actually do make $100,000, and that's where the pay stub will help you. Suppose that the landlord lives in another state. Can all of this be done at a distance? And how will the tenant get the key if someone of integrity cannot be there to help the tenants move in? So that's the bigger question of, can you landlord from a long distance? Yes, you can, and Cozy will help you manage that property it's not a property management company, but it is software to help you do it. No matter how good the software is, it's not a physical thing, so it's not going to be able to pass out keys to let tenants come in, or it's not going to be able to actually do a move-out inspection for you. So you will need somebody on the ground. There are plenty of people that use Cozy to manage. Actually, I think it's close to 50% of our landlords manage their own properties from afar with Cozy as their tool of choice. But they also have property managers or neighbors or handyman that they trust, that they have keys or use a lockbox that get into their properties that way to handle those things. And they would just pay those people like at the one-time occurrences. So if they do a move-out inspection, maybe they'll pay them $50 for that. Or if they have to show a property, then maybe they'll pay them $50 for that showing. What I like to do with long-distance properties is I will actually pick really good tenants, and then I'll befriend them, and I'll say, hey, listen, you're leaving. Thank you for your tenancy, but will you help me show the property? And I will give you $25 for every people that I send, every group that I send to you. And if you show them the place, you keep it clean, you sell them on the location, you do the marketing for me, the sales pitch, then I'll pay you $25. And if any of those groups actually sign a lease, I'll give you an additional $100. And they love it. Gosh, man, I've had so many tenants get super excited because now they're moving, they're hurting for cash. They just had to pay a security deposit somewhere else, and they have an opportunity to earn hundreds of dollars. So even if I show the property to, let's say 20 people, right? 20 groups, and I use my current tenant to do that, and they are there at their own house and they show the property, that's still going to be less than paying a property manager the 1 month's worth of rent for a finder's fee. That's just so expensive. So use your current tenant if you can. If you have a good relationship with them, they'll keep the place clean in order to get your money. So I like that. Okay, so Andrew is asking, can you manage properties? Oh yeah, sorry. Can you manage properties in a different state? Absolutely. Cozy is a national product, so the only requirement is you have to have the address has to be a U.S. address for the property in question, and you have to have a U.S. bank account. So we can't transfer money overseas or the Cayman Islands or anything. Like, the rent has to go somewhere with a U.S. bank account. So, but it can be in any state, in any territory that the U.S. owns. How do you handle a tenant that breaks their lease? Good question. So that's kind of a trick question. How do you handle a tenant that breaks their lease? First of all, I don't let tenants break their lease. They can't just willingly say, I'm done. They may choose to refuse payment, but they can't actually break the lease until we both agree or a judge says it's broken, or unless there's a violation or something. But if I have a tenant who wants to leave, I have a clause in my lease that says there's an early termination fee of 2 months worth of rent. So they can exercise that at any point. 2 months worth of rent plus 60 days notice. No problem, right? If they want to leave in March, they tell me January 1st. Not a problem. And they pay for March, or they pay for January and February in rent. And then when they leave, they also pay me 2 months worth of rent. That's the fee to get out of the lease. That fee, what that fee is buying them, that early termination clause, it's buying them the fact that they will no longer be held responsible for any rent thereafter. So I'm taking a risk. I'm saying, if you pay me 2 months worth of rent as a fee, then you can say goodbye and I will never be able to come after you for more rent. But if they just up and leave and they say, I'm not paying you a dime more, good luck finding me, sucker, which happens, right? You can still hold them responsible for the rent in the lease. If it's a fixed term lease and they have 6 months left, you can still charge them for those additional rent months. They may not want to pay you, but you could still hold them responsible for it up until, this is important, up until the point where you find a new tenant. Some states mandate this. They call this mitigation of damages to a tenant. Mandate that once you find a new tenant, then the old one's no longer responsible. They hate it when you double dip on rent. But some states don't require it. I just think it's unethical to double dip on rent. So go find yourself a new tenant as fast as you can, and because that tenant's probably going to pay you. And then as soon as that is done, count up all the damages you had. So if it took you a month and a half to find a new tenant, then you have a month and a half worth of rent that old tenant still owes you, even though they moved out. You can take that debt, you can go to a court, usually small claims court, and get a judgment for that. That judgment will then let you do collections or garnishments or whatever. So it's important to get that judgment. That's what I do when a tenant just abandons a lease and then it's officially terminated or broken when I find a new tenant or they pay that early termination fee. Okay, so Rod is asking, does Cozy do Canada credit pulls on renters or Canadian credit pulls on renters? No, unless the data is in Experian. So we pull the money from or pull the data for the credit report from Experian. It is all the data that Experian has. So I honestly don't know the answer to that question. I was going to say no, but if Experian has credit reporting data from Canada, then maybe it would be in there. So that's a good point. I'm going to find out. I'll email you if I figure it out. Okay. Chuck and Karen are asking, our tenant still has boxes everywhere inside her place. Is there anything we can do to sort through them and clean it up? So I'm assuming that she's left and she's gone, she's abandoned the property, or she's moving out and she still has boxes. Yes, if the place has been abandoned and it's within general reason that the person is not coming back, then you can treat that property, that abandoned property as abandoned property, and you can do certain things with it. Every state is a little different, so check out the state laws on Landlordology, but you can handle abandoned personal property typically with care. So you have to notify the tenant sometimes upwards of 30 days or more. Tell them, hey, come get your stuff. I'm storing it in the basement. I'm storing it in a garage. I'm storing it at a different location, whatever. And you're responsible for the charges or the money that it took me to move it. Sometimes you can even put it in a storage unit and have the tenant pay that fee in order to get their stuff out. But typically you just can't throw it away. Some states like Texas, I believe you can just throw it away. Texas is kind of the Wild West still, but typically if you throw away something of value, they could easily come back and say, you threw away my mother's engagement ring. It's worth $20,000. Now pay me that money. And they might win. Even as wrong as that sounds, they might win. So just take good care of it. It's a hassle. I don't want you to have to go through that, but just take good care of it. Matt is asking, do you have suggestions on how to get your lawn watered if you have tenants pay the utilities for sewer and water, since you would be using the water that they are paying for? It's a good question. Yes. So the trick to that, which it is tricky, the trick to that is to make sure that your lease specifically says they're responsible for paying for or for watering the lawn. So in that case, it doesn't matter if they water it or you come over and water it. If the grass needs watering, then they're just going to have to pay for it. It doesn't matter if they've authorized it for you to come do that or not. They're responsible for in the lease. So if the grass is dying, then that's on them. If they do let the grass die because they didn't water it, you could withhold that money to resod the grass or fix it or whatever. So put it in the lease. If it's not in the lease, if they're paying for the water but they're not responsible for keeping up the grass, then I don't see how you could use that water. You kind of put yourself in a hole there. So make sure it's in the lease that they are in charge of keeping the lawn, healthy. Pamela is asking, how much are the Pamela. Yes, how much are the credit and background checks through Cozy? Good question. I'm sorry I never said anything earlier, but the credit reports and the background checks are $19 each, paid for by the tenant, or if you request both of them, it's $34 bundled. So you save a little bit, or they save a little money if you order it. What I personally do is in Cozy, I actually require that a credit report and background check be submitted at the time of application. So there's a checkbox you can check as a landlord or manager and say, I don't want any applications until both of those things come through. So it makes it really easy. So I get all the information at once. The tenants, it's one seamless experience. It takes them just maybe 5-6 minutes to do all of it together. It's great. So yes, $34 if you want both of them. Yvonne is saying, do you have a step-by-step process for getting a court judgment? I had to evict my tenant, but they left me owing $7,800. Back rent, utilities, and damages over $1,000. Congratulations on the debt. Yes, Congratulations on the judgment. That is the first step. So now, do I have a process for? Oh, okay. I'm sorry. No, you didn't get the judgment. I'm sorry, Iman. Yes. So that may be more than what your local small claims will allow. And if that's true, then you have to go to a higher court. And if that's true, then you probably need to hire a lawyer. But if that's within your small claims limit, then I would just go to small claims court, get the judgment, and then you can garnish their wages, or you can send it to collections, or whatever, and hurt them that way and try to get the money. So get the judgment, go to your local county court and look up small claims, see what that amount is. If not, then talk to a lawyer about a higher court. Melinda is asking, hi Lucas, if you collect holding deposits from more than one eligible applicant during a landlord's open house, how do you determine which applicant gets the place? Does the appointment matter? Good question. So a lot of times, and the best practice is that you should review the applicants in the order in which they applied. So the appointment does not matter. It's the order in which they submit the application. Now that is not, I will repeat, I've never found any state that makes that a law that you have to accept applicants in that order, but I think it is a best practice. So even in California, I even talked to their fair housing office. It is not a law in California. It is just a recommendation, and a good one. So yes, so I will collect holding deposits from multiple groups sometimes, and then they will go, fill out an application. So that holding deposit is just security, that they're going to finish it. So and basically I tell them, give me your holding deposit, go fill out an application right now. And it doesn't really become active until I get these applications. The first people to fill out the application, I'll review first. And then if you pass, I'll convert your holding deposit to a security deposit. And then if it doesn't, I'll just give you your holding deposit back. So I'd rather have more deposits and just give them back or rip up the checks or whatever, than not have enough. And most people are okay with that. I'm not going to do anything wrongful or illegal with that money. It's just, just security. So I will say that if you do want to do that, check your state laws too, because sometimes they do have laws on holding deposits, but not many states actually do. Some do. Okay, so Kevin is asking, I had my tenant sign up today with Cozy to process a payment. It was very easy. That's awesome. Congratulations, Kevin. Yeah, it's designed to be easy. It really is. Erica, the domestic violence victims are a protected group. Yes, you are absolutely right. So we were talking about sex offenders are not a protected class, but domestic violence victims are. Well, I shouldn't say they're a protected class because it's not technically a class, but if they have victim status in their local area under domestic violence, then they are entitled to certain rights. Like they can oftentimes terminate a lease or get out of a lease with 30 days notice or quicker. They are entitled to a lot of privacy. You can't talk about the issue or whatever. But you're asking, is that a federal or state law? That is a state law typically. Domestic violence rights are state laws, and they vary greatly by state. And can you evict them if they violate any of the lease terms and won't pay rent? Yes, yes. You can, you certainly can. So they still have to pay rent. Just because they were a victim of domestic violence doesn't mean they can forego rent. So the fact that they don't pay rent or get a pack of wolves as dogs when you said no pets doesn't allow them to do that. They're completely unrelated. So yes, you can evict them for that. Okay, Andrew, yes, you are here. Good, I'm glad. Abigail is asking. Abigail is saying, this is not so much a question, but a comment. I'm a newer landlord, and your webinars and resources have been super helpful for me in navigating everything that a landlord needs. I appear professional in the screening process, even though I haven't done one before. Thanks. Abigail, that is so awesome. If you don't mind, I'm going to share that comment with the rest of the team because we get comments like that regularly from Cozy customers, and they love it. So it's a great power booster for the team. So thank you. Tiara is asking, is there a feature on Cozy that allows tenants to send maintenance requests to landlords? No, but it's on the roadmap. So maintenance requests are obviously a thing that happens, and so we're working on building that and the whole maintenance request submission and then tracking and handling. So it's coming. It's not there yet, but yes, it's coming. Sunny is asking, if you rent out a duplex with one zone heating for the whole house, do you just eat it or split it among the tenants? That's a great question. I actually live in a house that has an apartment underneath it with a single zone heating system. And you can do it any number of ways as long as it's fair. So some counties, I will say this, some counties will require a separate heating unit for the dual certificate of occupancy. But if they don't, you just have to basically make it inhabitable. So oftentimes that means that their unit has to be able to get to 68 degrees and not too hot, though. You don't want to sweat them out. But just set it up. So what I do is I tell my tenants that, hey, listen, it's a shared unit, but I've figured out that, I'm just going to charge you. It's a 3-story house. The first story is actually the apartment, so it's a third of the square footage. I charge them a third of the heat bill, and it's fine, right? A third of the space. It's what they're renting. So that is logical. That's fair, and it works out. So because they can't control the temperature, I will provide them with space heaters and fans, during the summer and winter, and they don't even need them, but they like it, and so it's their way to control temperatures if they need to. Scott is asking, can you specify once again about the deposit money being in another account so that you can have your deposit money in the same account that you pay repairs from, or is you're responsible? Yes. Okay, so let me clarify. I think I know what you're asking. So many states require that a security deposit be put in a separate account. I don't know what state you're in, but I would say that's a best practice because it's not commingling funds when you do that. It's when you commingle funds, you're going to spend that money. You're going to, all of a sudden there's a roof repair that needs to happen and you end up spending that deposit accidentally if it's mixed in with your other money. So what I suggest is for each unit, and this only works really for smaller landlords, but have a separate bank account for each unit that you own, each lease really, each section. So if it's a single family home, then that's one account. If you have 5 single family homes, that's 5 accounts. If you have a multifamily unit, a 4-plex, let's say, you'd have 4 bank accounts, one for each security deposit for that unit. And then when a tenant leaves, you pay them back out of that account, and then you just put the new security deposit back, from the new tenant that's moving into that same account. So the account numbers don't change, but you're just you're keeping the security deposit of that moment in that account. Your operating account is a separate checking account where you collect all the rent and you make all payments towards contractors, taxes, mortgages, whatever out of that account. So you're not mixing your personal funds. If you are a large property manager and you have hundreds or even dozens, I would say, of units, many times in most states, you're allowed to do a single deposit fund, deposit account where all of your security deposits are in that one escrow account. However, unless you're really good with accounting, it gets very messy because sometimes you have to collect interest on that money and then you have to be able to calculate that interest even though you have other people's money in there. So if you can, swing it as individual accounts for each property or unit. If you can't or you have too many, then really up your accounting method. Okay, so Brandon is asking, is it appropriate to give a Christmas gift to a tenant? I typically give a gift card to a local restaurant and they seem to appreciate it. Yes, I give gifts, Christmas gifts all the time to every one of my lease holders, my tenants. I don't give them individual gifts, but I give them as a whole for the house. Yes, so the IRS actually will allow you to expense $25 per person per gift. So theoretically, if you had 2 people in a house, you could do $50, I think. So don't quote me on that. I'm not a tax attorney, but that was what it is the last time I checked. If you go to landlordology.com and just type in gifts, you'll see like a whole list of gift ideas and some of the tax rules associated with that. But yeah, I think it's a great idea. It's a great way to build goodwill, and they usually do appreciate it. Will Cozy always be completely free? Yes. So the core services of Cozy will always be free. That's tenant screening, rent collection, and applications, online applications. They will always be completely free for landlords and managers. It does charge the tenant stuff for credit reports and background checks. And if they want to use a credit card to pay, there's a small transaction fee that's associated with that credit card charge. That's just Visa and MasterCard, but what they charge. So yeah, but it'll never charge you any money. There will be in the future, there will be extra add-on services. So we may offer legal forms, so you don't have to go to a third party, or we'll offer advanced accounting. So if you want those additional premium services, you might have to pay for that, but it'll just be in one-off services, or maybe a professional premium version, kind of like LinkedIn. If you're familiar with that, there's the free version, and then if you want these extra things, you might pay for it. But what you see right now will always be free. So yes, I'm excited to say that. Katrina is saying, thank you, Lucas. You're welcome. I'm glad you could attend. Andrea is saying, after tenants pay rent, how long does it take for me to see the money in my account? Great question. So it depends on how the tenants pay. If they are doing it through a bank transfer through Cozy, it will take anywhere from 3 to 5, potentially 6 days if there's a holiday or something mixed in there. And that's just standard ACH transaction times. And it's free. So there's, you can't complain too much. But that's typically how long it would take for a check to clear anyway, to really clear. So it's about the same as a check. If they pay with a credit card, then it's a lot quicker, 1 to 2 days. So those are the times. Anyway, Chuck and Karen are saying, no, she still lives there. This is for the, you asked about all the stuff that was in the house. How do you clean up? If you have a tenant who still lives there, then you have to decide at what point you're going to terminate the lease. So if she's living there and paying rent, then you have no right to go in and touch her stuff. But if a tenant is gone, if they've abandoned it, but she's saying still live there, like, you got to have some sort of violation, right? So if she's destroying property somehow through lack of maintenance or whatever, then that could be a violation. Or if she's not paying the rent, then yes, you could terminate the lease with proper notice. And then once that lease is terminated, then you can treat it as abandoned property if she isn't going to come get it. So I hope that was clear. Shoot me an email if you have more on that. I hope I answered it. Again, my email is lucas@cozy.co. Andrew is asking, will Cozy ever allow you to charge an application fee? Yes, actually. We had an idea to not do that, and just, application fees are kind of just not favorable for tenants. We are a landlord company, but the credit report and the background check, oftentimes what our landlords do is they just say, well, listen, I'm not going to collect an application fee because I got to handle that money, but you can charge for the credit report and background check, and the tenant just pays that. So that's kind of the application fee. But we've received enough requests from bigger property managers to say, hey, listen, I do make a decent amount of money on application fees, so I'd like to charge an extra $50. We will probably implement that when we also allow the landlord to pay for those credit reports and background checks. So it just kind of makes sense to do it all at the same time. So yeah, that's coming. It's not there yet, but it's coming. Okay, so Rod is saying Superior Court is the same court, but the landlord really has the ability to sue in a higher amount. Oh, you're asking, okay, so you're talking about the question that was somebody owed $7,800, and I said small claims usually has a limit. You're right. And I will say that some states, it's not the same court. And maybe in Florida, it is municipal Superior Court is the same court as small claims, just a higher level. You're right. But some states it's not. And when you get into that higher court, I think it's just a better idea to have a lawyer with you. I mean, small claims is a little more flexible and a little more accommodating towards self-representation, but the higher courts, I just think it's wise, especially when you're dealing with $7,800. You can sue for legal fees too, so it shouldn't be too much of a cost. Okay, Melinda is saying, thank you so much. I'm glad you could join us, Melinda. Kelly is saying, thanks, Lucas. Great webinar. I love Cozy and Landlordology. I'm a brand new landlord, and you've provided such helpful info. Thank you, Kelly. I'm really glad you could be here tonight. Okay, so let's see. Stephen is suggesting that we start our own rent collection company that buys old debt for cheap and making it work through Cozy. That is certainly a profitable business. I don't think we've ever talked about that. But thank you for those suggestions. I will submit all of these comments to the rest of the team. Lily is saying, what if one of the three adults has a terminal illness and lost her income, and the other two adult tenants are her family wanting to stay on the premise and take care of her? What if they stop paying rent and are in financial trouble due to medical reasons? It's hard to evict them on moral grounds. What do I do? Yeah, you know what? I am very sympathetic. I mean, when somebody has a terminal illness, nothing else matters, right? I mean, it's all we do here in with rental properties and landlording and all our jobs. I mean, it's all fun and games when compared to a terminal illness. And I think that when you have a tenant who does have a terminal illness and their family's trying to take care of them, you should be sympathetic. And oftentimes in that case, all of their money is going towards trying to cure the person and getting paying hospital bills and doctor's fees. But on the other hand, you have a mortgage to pay, and I don't think losing your property into foreclosure to help these people out is the right thing to do. So what I would do in that situation is I would actually help the tenants figure out what to do. So I would volunteer to say, I will work with you, I will make this happen. But if there's any sort of situation where you're not paying rent, just know that I will eventually come after you for that debt. Even if you file bankruptcy, like I will figure it out. I will do everything in my power to collect that. So please don't screw me over. But I will work with you in the meantime to try to help you find a new place to live if you can't afford this place any longer. So the general rule is that if you can't pay, you can't stay. So I try to be supportive, and I don't want to cause additional stress on somebody who's already terminally ill, but I'm also not going to lose my house over their illness. Because I have a family to take care of, so I'm not going to go bankrupt because of that. Anyway, but you have to put on your sympathy hat and try to help the situation, find a solution creatively that works for both of you. They don't want to screw you over. They don't want to not pay you usually. So you just got to work with them. Sorry, that's a great question. I'm sorry if that's the situation. Okay. Sonny is asking, was George Bluth charged with arson for burning down a banana stand? Probably. I don't know if I saw that episode, but yes, probably. Will there be, Andrew's asking, will there be show notes later in this webinar? Thanks for all the useful information. I missed about 40 minutes of it. Yes, so check in the GoToWebinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll see at the bottom there is a handout section. You can actually get the presentation from tonight and just download that. I will also post this as soon as, because it is being recorded, I will post it on Landlordology. The URL is landlordology.com/replay. And so when you go there, you'll see this presentation when I post it. It'll probably be tomorrow or the next day. Right now, it's the old presentation from last time. So I hope that that helps. Guys, let's see, we're back on questions here. There was one other question that came in through email. It's from Sarah. I hope, Sarah, you're with us. Number one, if a long-term resident is now on a month-to-month basis, how soon do we need to give notice to vacate? 30 days or 60 days? That varies by state. Sometimes it's 10 days. Sometimes it's 30. Sometimes it's 60. It just varies by state. Also, Sarah asked, if we want to move to online rent payments, is it possible to incentivize the online payment with a discount? Or conversely, a fee for paying with a check? Yeah, you absolutely could. Just put it in the lease. So lots of people do that. We have cozy landlords who say to make it mandatory or to incentivize them to pay with online rent payments, we make it 5% cheaper. I think that it's probably better to just charge a rent or a check processing fee. So say, here's your rent, you can pay it with Cozy. But if you want to pay by check, I will allow it, but it will be a $20 charge extra to handle that check. And we've heard from a lot of people, especially large property managers, who say, it was when they did that, when they charged a check processing fee or a cash processing fee or whatever, that they saw like 95% conversion to online rent payments. So that's what I would do. I would certainly charge a payment to handle the check. I hope I answered all your questions. Thank you again for joining us tonight. This went extra long, but it is a popular webinar and we had a ton of questions. Thank you again for joining. It is being recorded and I will post it on landlordology.com/replay when it's available. If you have any additional questions or want to follow up, my email is lucas@landlordology.com or lucas@cozy.co. Thank you again, and best of luck to you. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.